My boss's toxic daughter fired me on her first day, but she never expected me to own the company. The morning light filtered through the blinds of my modest office at Stratton Enterprises as I sipped my coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used for the past 12 years. My name is Elliot Reed, though most around here just call me Eli. I was neither flashy nor particularly noticeable, just the way I preferred it. My desk, positioned in the corner of the executive floor but not quite part of the main hallway of power offices, told the same story, essential but invisible. That particular Tuesday morning, I was reviewing the quarterly projections when my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Victor Stratton Direct Line, and my heart skipped a beat. A direct call from the founder himself was rare, even for someone who had been with the company as long as I had. "Victor," I answered, abandoning formality as he'd insisted years ago. "Eli, my office, 10 minutes. Bring the Singapore deal files." His voice sounded tired, strained in a way I hadn't heard since the financial crisis 3 years earlier. I gathered the requested files, straightened my unassuming gray tie, and headed down the hall. As Chief Strategy Officer, a title I'd earned through years of quiet competence rather than maneuvering, I'd helped guide Stratton Enterprises through treacherous waters before. But something in Victor's voice suggested this storm might be different. When I entered his expansive corner office with its panoramic view of the city, Victor was standing at the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the skyline he'd helped reshape over the past 30 years. "Close the door, Eli," he said without turning. "The company's in trouble. Deep trouble." I sat down, opened my notebook, and waited. Victor had never been one for dramatics. "Henderson Capital is pulling out," he finally said, turning to face me. "They're selling their shares, and they've convinced the Yamamotos to do the same." The implications hit me immediately. Henderson and the Yamamoto Group controlled nearly 40% of Stratton's shares between them. If they dumped them simultaneously on the open market, our stock would plummet. Worse, it would leave us vulnerable to a hostile takeover. "Why now?" I asked, already flipping through mental strategies. Victor sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "Henderson's son has taken over their family office. He thinks we're too conservative, wants to invest in cryptocurrencies and virtual reality startups instead of boring old manufacturing. And the Yamamotos are following his lead." I nodded, understanding the full picture. Victor had built Stratton Enterprises on rock-solid manufacturing and distribution systems, unglamorous but profitable and stable. In a world chasing the next big tech breakthrough, companies like ours were seen as dinosaurs by young investors with dreams of unicorn valuations. "We need to find new investors," I said simply. "Established ones who value stability and consistent returns." Victor's laugh was hollow. "In 2 weeks? That's when the sale goes through." I met his gaze steadily. "Give me 3 days." That night, I canceled my weekend plans and dove into my network, the quiet, powerful connections I'd cultivated over years of solving problems and delivering results without seeking credit. I called in favors. I worked through the night preparing presentations. I flew to Chicago and then to Boston for face-to-face meetings. I pulled out every stop, leveraging relationships I'd spent years building, all while the rest of the executive team remained blissfully unaware of the crisis. By Monday morning, I'd secured commitments from 3 investment groups who valued exactly what Stratton offered: stability, consistency, and long-term growth without flash or hype. They agreed to purchase the shares at a premium, preventing both the market shock and the vulnerability to hostile takeover. When I walked into Victor's office to deliver the news, he stared at me in disbelief. "How did you pull this off?" he asked, scanning the signed term sheets. I shrugged. "I just reminded people of our worth." Victor leaned back in his chair, studying me with new eyes. "You saved this company, Eli. Not just my legacy, but the livelihoods of our 2,800 employees." "It's my job," I replied simply. "No," Victor shook his head. "It's extraordinary. And it deserves extraordinary recognition." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "I want to make you a shareholder. A major one." I opened the folder to find transfer documents for 38% of Stratton Enterprises, the same percentage we just prevented from being dumped on the open market. Victor, I can't accept this. It's too much. The shares were worth tens of millions. You're not accepting a gift, he said firmly. You're accepting what you've earned. This company survived because of you. Its future should be partly yours to protect. I stared at the papers, mind racing. The board doesn't need to know the specifics, he finished. The shares will be held in a trust I'll manage until I retire or pass on. After that, they transfer directly to you with full voting rights. His eyes held mine. I trust you, Eli. I always have. After careful consideration, I signed the papers. Not for power or wealth, but for stability, for the company I'd quietly helped build for over a decade. Just one condition, I said as Victor's assistant notarized the documents. Let's keep this between us. I don't want special treatment. I don't want to be seen differently. Victor nodded, understanding. You always did prefer to work from the shadows. I prefer to work where I'm effective, I corrected gently. The next 3 years were among Stratton's most successful. We expanded methodically, paying careful attention to company culture and sustainable growth. Victor, energized by our narrowly avoided disaster, became more involved than ever, mentoring young talent and reinforcing the values that had made the company strong. And me? I continued as always, efficient, loyal, and in the background. The executives who jockeyed for attention in meetings never suspected that the quiet man taking notes and asking occasional pointed questions held enough shares to change the company's direction. The ambitious managers who sometimes talked over me had no idea I could have fired them with a single call. I didn't want that power. I wanted stability, for the company, for its employees, and for the communities that depended on us. Then came the call I'd hoped would never arrive. Victor's housekeeper, voice shaking, informing me that he'd suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was gone. The company was stunned. Victor had been more than a founder. He'd been the soul of Stratton Enterprises. As arrangements were made and tributes poured in, I sat quietly in my office, surrounded by a decade of memories and the sudden, unwanted weight of responsibility. The trust documents were clear. With Victor's passing, the shares transferred directly to me, along with all voting rights. I was now, without question, the majority shareholder of Stratton Enterprises. Before I could decide how to handle this new reality, another piece of news rippled through the company. Camille Stratton, Victor's only child, was flying in to take her rightful place at the head of the company. I'd met Camille only twice. Once at a holiday party where she'd spent the evening on her phone, and once at a company anniversary event where she'd shown up 3 hours late. In both instances, she'd looked through me as if I were part of the furniture. Now she was coming to claim a throne she hadn't earned, in a kingdom whose workings she didn't understand. The storm clouds were gathering once again, but this time, I held more power than anyone realized, including Camille herself. The day Camille Stratton arrived at headquarters, the entire building seemed to hold its breath. I watched from my office window as her gleaming black Tesla pulled into the reserved parking space that still had Victor's name on it. She emerged wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salaries, designer heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. The board had called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Though no official announcement had been made, the rumors were already circulating. Victor's daughter was swooping in to claim her birthright. I tucked away the trust documents I'd been reviewing and headed to the conference room, my face carefully composed into its usual mask of professional neutrality. By the time I arrived, the executive floor was buzzing with nervous energy. I slipped into my usual seat near the middle of the large mahogany table, prominent enough to participate but not so prominent as to draw immediate attention. The other executives were clustering in small groups, whispering anxiously. Thomas from finance caught my eye. "Have you met her before?" he asked quietly. "Twice," I replied. "Briefly. And?" I chose my words carefully. "She's Victor's daughter." He understood what I wasn't saying and grimaced just as the double doors swung open. Camille made an entrance like she was walking a runway, not entering a boardroom in mourning. Her black dress was fashionable rather than somber, her makeup flawless, her blonde hair gleaming under the recessed lighting. At 32, she was striking in a way that commanded attention, and she knew it. "Thank you all for coming," she announced without preamble, taking her place at the head of the table, her father's chair. No one had invited her to sit there, but no one objected either. "I know this is a difficult time for everyone who cared about my father." The way she emphasized, "everyone who cared," made it sound as though she was excluding herself from that group. Given their notoriously strained relationship, perhaps she was. "But business continues," she continued briskly. "And as the Stratton and Stratton Enterprises, I will be assuming the role of CEO, effective immediately." Several board members exchanged glances. Martin Weathers, the most senior among them, cleared his throat. "Miss Stratton, while we understand your interest in your father's company, there are procedures for appointing a new CEO. The board must vote and—" "The board," Camille cut him off with a brittle smile, "will find that my father's will grants me controlling interest in his shares. And those shares, gentlemen," she added with a nod in my direction that felt more dismissive than inclusive, "constitute a significant portion of this company." I bit the inside of my cheek. Victor's personal shares, separate from the ones he transferred to me, amounted to about 12%. Significant, but far from controlling interest. Either Camille was bluffing, or she genuinely didn't understand the company's ownership structure. "Now," she continued, pulling out a tablet, "I've spent the past week reviewing operations, and I've determined that this company needs a reset. A fresh vision for the future." What followed was a 20-minute presentation filled with buzzwords and vague promises of modernization. She spoke about digital transformation and disruption as if they were magical incantations rather than complex business strategies. The executives around the table maintained poker faces, but I could see the alarm in their eyes. This woman, who had never worked a day at Stratton, or possibly anywhere, was proposing to overhaul systems that had been refined over decades. "Any questions?" she finally asked, setting down her tablet with a satisfied smile. The silence stretched uncomfortably until I raised my hand slightly. "Miss Stratton, these are ambitious goals. Have you considered phasing in these changes to minimize disruption to our current contracts and client relationships?" Her eyes narrowed as they focused on me. "And you are?" "Elliot Reed, Chief Strategy Officer." "Ah, yes. One of my father's longtime employees." The pause made it sound like a liability rather than an asset. "Well, Elliot, I believe in decisive action. Phasing in changes is just corporate speak for resistance to progress." I started to respond, but she continued. "In fact, this brings me to my next announcement. As part of our reset, I'll be restructuring the executive team." She picked up her tablet again and began reading names and new titles. Some were demoted, others promoted seemingly at random. Some weren't mentioned at all. I waited, tension building in my chest, until she finished the list without saying my name. "Excuse me," I said calmly. "I didn't hear my position in the new structure." Camille's smile was pure ice. "That's because there isn't one, Elliot. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately." The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes swung between us like spectators at a tennis match. "You're firing me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the shock rippling through me. "I prefer streamlining operations," she replied. "But yes. We'll have HR prepare your severance package. I'm sure it will be generous, given your tenure." I could have said so many things in that moment. I could have revealed that I, not she, held the majority shares. I could have turned the tables with a single sentence. Instead, I closed my notebook, stood up, and nodded once. "I see. I'll clear out my office." As I walked toward the door with my head held high, Camille called after me. "Nothing personal, Elliot. Just cleaning house." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the woman sitting in a throne she hadn't earned, surrounded by executives too shocked or too intimidated to challenge her. "Understood," I said quietly. "Good luck, Miss Stratton. I think you're going to need it." The security guard escorting me to clear out my office looked more uncomfortable than I felt. Dave had worked at Stratton for 15 years. We'd exchanged holiday cards and occasionally shared lunch in the cafeteria. "Mr. Reed, I'm really sorry about this," he mumbled as we reached my door. "If it means anything, everyone's shocked. You're Stratton. More than she'll ever be." I smiled gently. "Thank you, Dave. But let's keep this professional. I wouldn't want you getting in trouble." Inside my office, I carefully packed 12 years of my life into 2 cardboard boxes. Family photos, my collection of company milestone mementos, the fountain pen Victor had given me after our first successful acquisition. I left behind the plaques and awards. They belonged to Stratton Enterprises, not to me. As I worked, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from shocked colleagues. I answered none of them. This wasn't the time for hasty words or emotional reactions. When I finished, Dave helped carry the boxes to my car. As I slid into the driver's seat, he hesitated. "What will you do now, Mr. Reed?" I looked up at the building that had been my second home for over a decade. "The same thing I've always done, Dave. The right thing at the right time." Driving away from Stratton Enterprises felt surreal, like leaving a piece of myself behind. In a way, I had years of work, relationships built, systems created. But I'd also taken something crucial with me: knowledge. Knowledge of how the company ran, who the key players were, and most importantly, who actually owned it. Instead of going home, I drove directly to the offices of Klein & Associates, the law firm that had handled the share transfer 3 years earlier. Sarah Klein, the founding partner, was waiting for me, her expression a mixture of sympathy and determination. "I saw the news alert," she said, ushering me into her office. "Victor Stratton's daughter takes helm of family business." Her tone made clear what she thought of that headline. "She fired me," I said simply, sitting down across from her. "First day, first hour." Sarah winced. "Well, she's certainly making an impression." She pulled out a thick folder. "I've already started preparing the paperwork. With Victor's death, the trust automatically transfers all shares and voting rights to you. We just need to file the proper notifications." "How long will it take to process everything officially?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 with the current backlog at the Securities Commission." She studied my face. "You're not planning to storm back in tomorrow with the papers, are you?" I shook my head. "No. Let's not file anything yet." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "She fired you, Elliot. You have every right to walk back in there and return the favor." "And then what?" I asked quietly. "The company goes through another upheaval? The employees who've already lost their founder now watch a power struggle play out in public?" I shook my head again. "No. That's not how Victor would want me to handle this." "So what's your plan?" I leaned forward. "The annual shareholders meeting is in 6 weeks. Let's prepare everything, but keep it confidential until then. In the meantime, I need you to set up a monitoring system, stock performance, public statements, client relationships, anything that indicates how the company is doing under Camille's leadership." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. "You're giving her enough rope to hang herself." "I'm giving her the opportunity to prove me wrong," I corrected. "If she somehow rises to the occasion and leads effectively, I'll need to reconsider my approach." Sarah's skeptical expression said everything about how likely she thought that outcome was. "And if she doesn't? Then I'll have clear evidence to present to the board when I return." Over the next few weeks, I established a routine that felt foreign after years of corporate structure. I woke without an alarm, took long walks in the park, and caught up on reading that had nothing to do with quarterly projections or market analyses. To anyone watching, I appeared to be calmly accepting my new reality. But every afternoon, I met with Sarah to review the latest updates on Stratton Enterprises. The picture emerging wasn't pretty. Camille had replaced 6 more executives with friends from her social circle. The stock had dropped 12% in 3 weeks. 2 major clients had publicly expressed concern about the company's new direction. And an anonymous employee blog had sprung up, documenting the chaos inside the company, mandatory motivational sessions, arbitrary reassignments, and a new dress code that seemed designed primarily to showcase Camille's own designer wardrobe. "She's doing your job for you," Sarah remarked after one particularly damning report about a botched product launch. "At this rate, the board might vote her out before you even have to reveal yourself." "They can't," I reminded her. "They think she controls her father's shares." What neither of us said was what we both knew. Every day of Camille's reign damaged the company Victor had built. Every reckless decision eroded the stability I'd worked so hard to maintain. But I wouldn't be pushed into acting rashly. The right move at the wrong time was still the wrong move. So I waited, I watched, and I prepared, gathering information, consulting with key allies, and finalizing the legal documents that would soon change everything. 3 days before the shareholders' meeting, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Thomas from finance stood at my door, looking haggard and nervously glancing over his shoulder. "Elliot," he said without preamble, "it's worse than you know. She's planning to sell the manufacturing division to Henderson Capital, the same group that had nearly tanked us 3 years ago." The show was about to reach its final act. "Come in," I told Thomas, stepping aside. "Tell me everything." He collapsed onto my sofa, exhaustion written across his face. "It's a nightmare, Elliot. Absolute chaos. Yesterday she fired Robert Shin." I froze. "The head of operations? The man who's been with the company for 20 years. Thomas nodded grimly. He questioned her decision to reallocate resources from the Singapore project to her new digital innovation lab, which, by the way, seems to be primarily focused on creating a virtual reality tour of Camille's office. I poured us both a coffee and sat across from him. "And now the manufacturing division? She's calling it strategic realignment to focus on core competencies. But it's just another buzzword smokescreen. Henderson Capital is offering cash up front, and I think she wants to use it to fund her vanity projects." Thomas looked at me with desperate eyes. "People are jumping ship, Elliot. Jenkins and Peterson already accepted offers at Westlake Industries. Morale is in the gutter. What about the board?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Spineless," he spat. "Too afraid of losing their positions to challenge her directly. Martin tried once and she humiliated him in front of everyone, implying he was senile and out of touch." I nodded slowly, processing this information. "The shareholders' meeting is in 3 days. Can you hold things together until then?" Thomas looked confused. "What difference will the shareholders' meeting make? She controls her father's shares." I smiled slightly. "Does she?" Understanding dawned on his face. "You know something. Let's just say that Camille may find the meeting educational." I leaned forward. "Thomas, I need you to do 2 things for me. First, stall the Henderson deal. Any excuse, paperwork, compliance reviews, anything to push it past the meeting date. And second, make sure every board member and senior executive attends the meeting. In person, not by proxy." Thomas studied my face. "You're going to take her down." It wasn't a question. "I'm going to protect the company," I corrected. "The company Victor entrusted to me." After Thomas left, I called Sarah Klein. "We need to move up our timeline. Have the documents ready for the shareholders' meeting, and make sure Paul Weber is there to make the announcement." Paul Weber was the company's longtime legal counsel, respected, unimpeachable, and importantly, someone Camille couldn't easily dismiss. The next morning, I drove to Victor's house, a beautiful lakeside property I'd visited many times for strategy sessions and the occasional holiday gathering. Mrs. Abernathy, his housekeeper of 30 years, greeted me with a warm hug. "He'd be heartbroken to see what's happening," she said as she led me to his home office. "That girl never understood what the company meant to him." "I know," I said gently. "That's why I'm here. I need to find something." Victor had kept meticulous records of everything important, a habit I'd always appreciated. In his office safe, behind the painting of the company's first factory, I found what I was looking for, a letter, handwritten and sealed, addressed to the Board of Directors, Stratton Enterprises. His final instructions, written after he'd made me majority shareholder but never delivered. I didn't open it, that wasn't my place. But I knew its existence would be crucial in the days ahead. The morning of the shareholders' meeting arrived crisp and clear. I dressed with particular care, not in the understated grays and blues I usually favored, but in a sharp, confident navy suit with a red tie. Today wasn't about blending in. Today was about standing out. Sarah met me in the lobby of Stratton Enterprises. It felt strange being back, familiar yet foreign, like returning to a childhood home now occupied by strangers. "Everything's prepared," she said, handing me a leather portfolio containing the trust documents and transfer certificates. "Paul Weber will be making the announcement after the standard reports." "And Henderson Capital?" "No papers have been filed for the sale," she confirmed. "Thomas must have been successful in delaying it." We took the elevator to the top floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see the meeting was already underway. Camille stood at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically at a presentation slide showing ambitious, and utterly unrealistic, growth projections. I paused at the door, watching. In just 6 weeks, she'd managed to undo years of careful work. Stock down 23% now. Client relationships strained. Talented employees fleeing. All because she'd seen a company as an inheritance rather than a responsibility. "Ready?" Sarah asked quietly. I nodded, my hand on the door handle. "Ready." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "She's announcing the Henderson deal now. Couldn't stop it." Sarah saw the message and frowned. "That complicates things." "No," I said with newfound certainty. "That simplifies them." I pushed open the door, walking into the conference room with steady steps. Conversation halted. All eyes turned to me, some surprised, others alarmed, a few hopeful. Camille recovered first, her smile razor sharp. "Elliot, this is a private meeting for current company leadership and shareholders." I smiled back, equally sharp. "I know exactly what this meeting is for, Camille. That's why I'm here." Before she could respond, Paul Weber stood up. "Ms. Stratton, before you continue with the Henderson Capital announcement, there's an important matter of company ownership that needs to be addressed." Camille's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. "What are you talking about?" "The ownership structure is clear." "I'm afraid," Paul said, reaching for the documents Sarah was now handing him, "that it's not as clear as you might think." The crown was about to fall. The conference room fell silent as Paul Weber adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. Every face turned toward him, except mine. I was watching Camille, taking in the slight twitch at the corner of her perfectly painted lips, the first hairline crack in her confident facade. 3 years ago," Paul began, his authoritative voice filling the room, "Victor Stratton made a significant change to the ownership structure of this company. A change that, at the request of the other party involved, was kept confidential." Camille's laugh cut through the tension. "That's ridiculous. My father would never make major decisions without consulting me." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on anyone who had worked closely with Victor. He'd famously kept his daughter at arm's length from company business, precisely because of her lack of interest or aptitude. "Nevertheless," Paul continued unperturbed, "the documentation is quite clear." He placed a document on the table. Victor Stratton transferred 38% of Stratton Enterprises to a trust, which he managed until his death. Upon his passing, the shares and all voting rights transferred to the designated beneficiary. The board members leaned forward, eyes widening as they scanned the document being passed around. Martin Weathers was the first to look up at me, understanding dawning on his face. "The beneficiary," Paul stated, "is Elliot Reed." The room erupted in murmurs. Camille stood frozen, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. "This is preposterous," she snapped, snatching the document. "It must be a forgery. My father would never." "Your father did," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since Paul began. "After I saved this company from a financial crisis that would have destroyed it. A crisis most people in this room never even knew about." I stepped forward, placing Victor's sealed letter on the table. "This is a letter from your father to the board. His final instructions, written after he made me majority shareholder." Paul picked up the letter, verified the seal, and opened it carefully. As he read Victor's words aloud, I watched the color drain from Camille's face. "To the board of directors of Stratton Enterprises, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. My deepest wish is that this company continues to thrive on the principles of integrity, innovation, and respect that have guided us for 30 years. To ensure this future, I have entrusted majority ownership to Elliot Reed, the most capable leader I have ever had the privilege to work alongside. While my daughter Camille will always have a place at Stratton if she desires it, the controlling interest and decision-making authority rests with Elliot. Honor this decision as you have honored me. With gratitude for your service, Victor Stratton." The silence that followed was deafening. Camille stared at me, her composure crumbling like a sand castle at high tide. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew all along, and you let me fire you." I nodded once. "I did." "Why?" The question exploded from her. "Why wouldn't you say something right then? Why let me think I was in charge?" "Because this company isn't about you or me," I replied evenly. "It's about the 2,800 people who depend on it for their livelihoods. It's about the communities where we operate. It's about your father's legacy. I wanted to give you the chance to rise to the occasion." Martin Weathers cleared his throat. "According to these documents, Mr. Reed now controls 38% of shares. Combined with the various board members' holdings who would support him." He glanced around the table, receiving affirming nods. "That constitutes clear majority control. This is a shareholders' meeting," I pointed out. "And as the majority shareholder, I move that we vote immediately on the company leadership." "I second the motion," Thomas said firmly. "All those in favor of removing Camille Stratton from the position of CEO, effective immediately?" Martin called. Every hand in the room went up, except for Camille's and those of the two friends she'd appointed to the board. "All those in favor of rescinding the proposed sale of the manufacturing division to Henderson Capital?" Again, a forest of hands rose in agreement. Camille's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me. This company is my birthright." "No," I corrected her. "It was your father's life's work. And he entrusted it to the person he believed would honor that work. Now, I believe you were in the middle of firing me when we last spoke?" I paused, meeting her gaze steadily. "You fired me from a job I didn't need. Now I'm firing you from a role you never earned." She lunged for the documents, but Paul swiftly gathered them back into his folder. "These are legally binding, Ms. Stratton. Any challenge would be futile and only damage the company further. Security will escort you to clear out your office," I said, my voice gentler now. The victory was complete. There was no need for additional humiliation. "Your personal shares, the 12% your father left you, remain yours. You're welcome to keep them or sell them as you see fit." Camille grabbed her designer bag, her movements jerky with suppressed fury. At the door, she turned back, her mascara smudged from angry tears. "You won't get away with this. My lawyers will. Your lawyers will advise you to accept reality," I interrupted calmly. "Just as I accepted it when you fired me. The difference is I had a plan. You just had a sense of entitlement." After she stormed out, the room remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Martin spoke up. "Well, Elliot, it seems congratulations are in order. What are your plans as CEO?" I smiled, looking around at the faces of people who had built this company alongside Victor and me. "First, let's discuss who our new CEO should be. And I can tell you now, it won't be me." The real work was just beginning. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day Victor had first called me to his office 3 years earlier, I arrived to find Mrs. Abernathy, Victor's housekeeper, waiting in the lobby. "Mrs. Abernathy." I greeted her warmly. "What brings you here?" She pressed a small, wrapped package into my hands. "I was cleaning out more of Victor's things and found this. The note says it's for you, to be delivered when Elliot has set things right again." Her eyes twinkled. I thought now might be the time. Alone in my office, I carefully unwrapped the package to find a small wooden box. Inside was Victor's pocket watch, a family heirloom he'd carried every day, and a handwritten note. "Elliot, if you're reading this, you've done what I always knew you would, protected what matters. The watch belonged to my grandfather, who built something from nothing. Just like you. It should have gone to a son who understood the value of building rather than taking. Now it has. Keep time with it wisely. Victor." I traced my fingers over the engraved lid, vision blurring with unexpected tears. Not of sadness, but of recognition, of being seen, truly seen, for what I had quietly given to this company over the years. That afternoon, I called the executive team together for our weekly strategy meeting. As we discussed new markets and product innovations, I noticed something that had been missing during Camille's brief reign: laughter. Genuine collaboration. The sense that we were building something worthwhile together. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dave, the security guard who had escorted me out 6 months earlier, poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Reed, but there's a delivery for you downstairs." In the lobby stood a young man clutching a portfolio. "Mr. Reed? I'm Sam Lin. I just graduated from State with a degree in business analytics, and I was hoping to apply for the junior strategist position." His expression was earnest, his handshake firm but nervous, reminding me of myself 15 years earlier, hungry to prove myself in a world where I didn't have connections or family wealth to smooth my path. "Come to my office, Sam," I said, smiling. "Let's talk about what you could bring to Stratton Enterprises." As we walked to the elevator, he hesitated. "I read about what happened here, with the owner's daughter and everything. It must have been terrible to be fired like that." I considered this as we stepped into the elevator. Actually, it was clarifying. It reminded me of something essential. Real authority doesn't come from titles or family names. It comes from building something valuable and treating people with respect along the way. The elevator doors closed, carrying us upward to futures neither of us could yet see. But I knew one thing with certainty: whatever storms might come, Stratton Enterprises would weather them, just as it had weathered the brief, tumultuous reign of a princess who never understood the true meaning of ownership. That evening, I joined Thomas, Robert, and several other executives for dinner at Victor's favorite steakhouse. As we raised glasses to another record quarter, Thomas leaned over. "You know what I still don't understand?" he asked. "Why you didn't take the CEO position? It was yours by right." I smiled, thinking of the pocket watch now residing in my desk drawer. "Because some things aren't about rights or titles. They're about responsibilities." "Still," Robert chimed in, "most people in your position would have grabbed power with both hands." "I'm not interested in power," I replied. "I'm interested in legacy. Victor built something that matters to thousands of people. My job isn't to rule it, it's to ensure it survives." As the conversation shifted to new projects and possibilities, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. From the quiet strategist in the background to the unexpected owner, from the humiliation of being fired to the satisfaction of restoration, none of it had gone according to plan, yet somehow all of it had led to exactly where we needed to be. The next morning, I arrived early to find a handwritten note on my desk. It was from Thomas, now settling comfortably into his role as CEO. "Eli, just wanted to say thank you. Not just for the opportunity, but for showing us all what leadership really means. Victor would be proud. We all are. Thomas." I tucked the note away alongside Victor's letter and turned to the day's work. There were strategies to develop, markets to analyze, relationships to build. The quiet, essential work that had always been my strength. Some would call it ironic, that I had gained so much power only to deliberately step back from it. But those who truly knew me understood. I had never wanted to own a company. I had only wanted to protect one worth protecting. Some things, after all, can't be inherited. They must be earned day by quiet day, in the patient work of building rather than taking. Just as Victor had taught me. Just as I would teach others. The storm had passed. The calm, at last, had come.